What up, y'all? Welcome to another episode of Behind the Door podcast with Jeremy Hiltz and your boy, Brandon Brown. I like switching up the intro sometimes. It's fun, man. I don't know. Hopefully these intros don't get boring to you guys, but thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening. Thanks for supporting. We're here today fresh off a pretty amazing trip to Philadelphia last week. And, just excited to talk about the people we met, the connections we made, and the amazing work that we saw happening in Philly. Big shout out to the Petey Greene Program. If you guys don't know about the Petey Greene Program, Google it, look it up on social media. They're doing really amazing work. They're the biggest program, for education in prison in the country. Got more people trained as tutors, more people working and, on their education, more volunteers. Their numbers are amazing, and they're really doing amazing work across the country. And, it's an honor to be invited out there to go to Philadelphia for their fundraiser and a panel with some giants in Philadelphia doing some criminal legal reform work. And, Jeremy, just throw it over to you. Like, how was it in Philly for you, man, coming down there?
Oh, it was wonderful. It was also, I think, the Petey Greene Program, I can't thank them enough for having us out there and having us be a part of the fundraiser. It was, and I didn't realize this, is like last year we were able to submit some of our artwork to the silent auction. And this year, at that fundraiser, and then this year, we were able to go out there and really feels like it was very hospitable, and I really appreciate the opportunity of being out there. But really, Petey Greene nationwide is the largest provider of these educational services in correctional settings, and that is it's so important, right? A couple episodes ago, I was at Stevie was here. We were talking about the opportunity that's missed sometimes with people, and that how much that stifles their talent, like what they can actually offer the world, and what the Petey Greene Program does. I could just imagine, like, if I were able to have received an education earlier on in the system, and also the work that they do to get peers to become tutors, and it really transforms communities inside the carceral system, I think, and and then to see the work that they do and the community, I think, that they build is the most impactful thing that I saw out there about the Petey Greene Program, is how much they care about each and every person that they're trying to help get an education and empower.
And the work they're doing, the work speaks for itself, right? Like, their numbers speak for themselves. I'm just going to encourage you again, look up the Petey Greene Program to learn a little bit more about what they're doing. But it's also a really powerful experience for us to be down there, because we see how connected they are to people that are also doing similar work, but then adjacent work as well. People that are doing workforce development with incarcerated and formerly incarcerated people, right? Like, they've got
Shout out to Diverse Force.
Yeah, absolutely.
You guys are doing some amazing stuff down there. Somebody else that we met on the panel.
Yeah, Diverse Force, and there's a few other organizations represented that are just doing amazing work. And you see the community that they've built around supporting, directly impacted people before, during, and after incarceration. And for me, I was been reflecting about it the past few days. And, first of all, we got to shout out, Larry Miller, the chairman to the advisory board for Brand Jordan, the most popular brand on planet Earth, right? We had the privilege and the pleasure of doing a panel with Larry Miller and some other people just to talk about, education in prison and reform in general. And so for us to be invited down there to do the panel and meet somebody like Larry Miller, who, if you don't know his story, I'm not going to tell it all on this episode. I encourage you to look him up, but also,
you also got to read his new book.
Yeah.
Just put a book out that he was promoting down there. It's Jump from the Streets to the Boardroom. I've started reading it since I came home, and he is definitely a power of example in how education in the prison system can really transform someone's life. We're talking about, somebody that was going through the system as a teenager to, elevating himself to the chairman of the Jordan brand is, You know what I mean? That's why I think the title of the book is very appropriate for his situation, because he just literally jumped from incarceration to, he's the president of the Portland Trail Blazers and all that stuff,
And his story is powerful, right? Because it's also a story not just of the power of education, but a story about some of the social norms that we need to change. Because this, like, started his education in prison, finished his education on the outside, turned his life around, but still was so overly stigmatized, as a younger man, that he couldn't find work, even though he had his education, because of his criminal background. And, so like hearing his life trajectory and the fact that he had to hide his story for so long, and then finding the courage later on in life to work with his daughter over a, 13-year period to release this book, to finally come clean and tell his story. Like, there's good people out here who have made mistakes, and education was my pathway, but we also have to teach society to value that, right? To value that if you can get your education in a prison setting and then continue to pursue it even after prison, that you got some resilience and some skills and some things to like really give to the world.
I also want to, the most remarkable thing about his story for me, that, in and of itself is remarkable, but doing that as a person of color in the era that he grew up in, and like getting an education, and then this is not like, he didn't become the president of a construction company.
Yeah.
Right? He became, like, he's a very, very intelligent man, and for him to be able to carve like the wherewithal to be able to fight through that, as well as the barriers that we had back. I think. And the time that was at, that's even more remarkable about his story for me, is that, like, he had to fight literal racism in North Philly for a long time to get to where he's at. So
yeah, it's like a true story of overcoming, right? It's like a true, like a really authentic story of like rising to success despite being somebody who spent time in, juvenile corrections, and then also as an adult going to prison, and, to be able to rise to the status and the position that he's in, but also, like, what a testament to his character, because he didn't just do that and then like coast through life, as the chairman to the advisory board for the biggest brand in the world, right? He chose at a really pivotal moment to say, I got to tell my story so I can humanize other people who have been through the things that I've been through, inspire them that they can accomplish things, but also inspire society to be a little bit more accepting around people who have been to jail and prison. And for me, it's like, getting to meet him and shake his hand, he's just a true, like, authentically good person.
Very, very, very authentic. And the whole experience out there for me was, I use that word hospitality, but it was like, I felt like, being on the panel and just like sharing conversations and space with these guys that were doing all this amazing work, even though we come from different backgrounds, right? Like, we're coming from different places and we have different experiences, and we're able to like just come together and share in some of the work that we've been all doing together. And, just because we're out here in Lewiston, Maine, doesn't mean that the work isn't as important as what's going on across the country.
For sure.
And that's one of the things that I really respected about the whole situation, is how like inclusive they are in the conversation, and like how people respect each other's opinions and the work that they're doing.
And it's amazing, man, because like, as much as exciting as it was to like be on the panel with Larry Miller specifically, it wasn't until after the panel was over that I think Jeremy and I realized we were talking that, like, man, we just were connecting with some like phenomenal, amazing people that are doing work that's really making a difference, right? We met a filmmaker named Shu, and shout out to Shu, who's making films that humanize people's stories and the struggle that you go through in reentry. And
I learned something out there from Shu, and that he's got his series Walkies.
Yeah,
if anybody looked that up, check it out. Showed you more, but he. Walkies is a term in their system of somebody that like they walk the track together, or whatever. They're hanging out. That's your boy. That's like your best friend or whatever in the system. They call it the walkie. And some of the work that he's done and the perspective that he's done it from that seat has been it's pretty cool, man. It's like it's a different perspective, and it's also more community building, I guess, is really what I got from his work, you know.
No, for sure. And like the power of it, the power of the imagery, the power of the storytelling, the power of like the vulnerability for people to share those stories with him is like something that's really inspiring. And then to also be on the panel with a couple of people who, you know, are not directly impacted to the point that they spend time in prison, but, you know, they have had loved ones, or they've seen the potential of people in prison, whether it's through their relationship with Petey Greene, their relationship with Larry Miller, their relationship with Shuja. Like, you know, it's for them to be really invested in saying, like, people have talent. We have a workforce issue. We need to start giving people chances to come out and, you know, like, make a difference in their lives, but also make a difference in the world through, you know, being employed and, you know, reintegrating back into society in a really full way. It was just inspiring. And then it started getting me thinking too about our journey, right? Like our story. And, you know, for I think for us, it's like, it still is mind blowing to me that, you know, when you got this prison door, we didn't have any idea of what to do with it, right?
It brought us to this place.
It has brought us to the coolest places, man. And I think it's a testament to the power of this like physical object, and to see the people that we were on the panel with interacting with, and then to be at the fundraiser with the door, with our table and some material, some artwork, and to see people like really take a step back and go, you know, what do you mean it's your prison door, right?
I think that's one of the things we talked about on the panel, was the power of storytelling in a lot of ways, right? And like, that's what I really felt in the room was like, you know, it's the work that's being done, but the explanation of why these guys are doing the work sometimes is you know, we're talking about North Philly and you know, some of the areas like Kensington is the epicenter of this epidemic in a lot of ways, right? Like it's probably one of the largest open air drug markets in the country, right? And you know, after I was on that panel, I said, man, you know, you guys were you were working and stuff. I was like, man, I gotta go out and create some art, man. And so I headed down to the corner of K&A in Kensington, and we dropped the door out there and took some pictures, and we got some good artwork from that coming out soon. And I'm really excited because it was really, really powerful. But like, we dropped that thing out there in 10 minutes. There was gunshots, and you know, somebody overdosed. We gave up a bunch of water and some T-shirts, but like, it was like, I don't actually feel unsafe a lot of times, but I literally got out of the truck and I felt unsafe. We were there 15 minutes. Mike Connors is up in the back of the truck with a Dare T-shirt on, trying to get the thing out. Gunshots are going off, man. The reason I bring that up is because that's what these guys that we were on the panel with really care about.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's what I felt, is that like, re-entry, they were working so hard with re-entry and trying to get people employed and stuff like that, because they know the danger of what's really going on. That's a different, that North Philly and that little area, that's a different world. That's that's a totally different thing than like, even I don't deal with anything like that. You know what I mean? It's a different thing. So to see the commitment of these men to their community that's been so decimated is powerful to me. After I left Kensington, that's when I realized how important these men that were on the panel were to Philadelphia itself. You know what I'm saying?
And for them to understand that, like, the system's not going to fix Kensington, the system's not going to fix these neighborhoods.
They understand that they got to do the work themselves, and the commitment is inspiring to me. You know what I mean?
And that it means giving people opportunities and giving people a place to feel included and a community around them, and like a network of people.
Well, you know what I mean? And if you haven't experienced that, it's a different thing to look at people that have come from that environment, like the Kensington area, and look at them as human beings and that they need help and they're worthy of help. not everybody in the community looks at people that way. You know what I'm saying? Like Jeff, the guy that runs the Petey Greene Project, right? One of the, you know, I've had limited, he's supported us, and like really believed in us, and I believe that that's how he looks at everybody that comes into contact with. And that's what I saw. And like I said, it came full circle for me after I actually saw what was going on in the community, that they're committed to change.
Yeah. And, you know, it's interesting because when we talk specifically about the value of education, you know, a lot of times people go to prison and society feels like, why are we going to waste our time educating these people like they're throwaways, right?
Yeah.
Why should we put our resources and our tax dollars or whatever into providing an education for people who are criminals and people who have broken the social contract? Like, it's like, why would we reward them, right? And we forget too often, and I experienced this when I was in college and prison. Every time they would write a news article about it, the comments would be like, oh, really glad to see that, you know, my tax dollars are paying for this scumbag's education. I should tell my kid to rob a bank so he can get a free college education, right? Like, this is the rhetoric that we deal with. But we connect with people, we meet people, and I know it because the power, like for me, the most powerful thing I experienced in prison was that I got to get my education, because what it did for me is it reframed possibilities, right? It reframed my potential. It made me believe that I don't actually need to subscribe to the belief that I am a throwaway, that as I develop and my worldview changes and I get this education, that even if the world kind of beats me down, that's something nobody can take from me, right? And that's the value of the work that they're doing.
Because I know that when I was incarcerated, if any sort of resource sort of kind of showed like something that could help me, showed interest in me, like it changed me a little bit. You know what I mean? I was like excited that somebody actually cared about me. So I think the Petey Greene Project really, it's not just about the education, man. Like it's about how people feel about themselves and like the confidence that they can get from the education that I think the Petey Greene Program focuses on a great deal.
Yeah. And it's about, like, a lot of people we discount sometimes when we talk about higher ed, especially in prison environments, is like, we know the value of education. And this is like a funny thing, like people ask this, like, why was education so valuable to you? And I'm like, the same reason it's valuable to anybody, because it's really hard to get ahead in life if you're not educated, whether you're coming from a prison or from Princeton, right? Like, whether you live in Greenwich, Connecticut, or Kensington, you know, Pennsylvania, like, it's education. We know the power of it. And so, but you're 100% right. The power of education in prison a lot of times is the fact that it's really hard to offer an education to somebody while you're also dehumanizing them. So a lot of times these prison education programs come with the next element that's probably the most important part, is it makes you feel worthy. It gives you a community. A teacher is treating you like a student after the rest of your experience has been, you've been treated like an animal.
You feel human.
And I had this conversation with somebody last night where I was saying, you know, for me, my experience getting educated in prison, I attached to it so aggressively because when I was in the classroom and the teachers were coming from the college, they didn't view me as a prisoner. They viewed me as a student, as a human. And so for me, I didn't even understand the value of the learning I was doing at first, as much as I understood it feels good to not feel like a monster. It feels good to have somebody believe in me and connected to me and encouraging me to work on myself, whether it was through my math or my writing or my comprehension of history, whatever. I felt supported for like the first time in my life by somebody in an environment where every time I left the classroom, I felt like a monster. And that's what we need to talk about more, is that education is important because it provides more opportunities for people. It reduces recidivism in a proven way more than any other thing you offer anybody in a carceral space, right? But more, and perhaps most importantly, it makes people feel human. And so, you know, what Petey Greene is doing, training, you know, hundreds or thousands of volunteers, college students, and people in the community to come from outside, inside, to tutor people and to train people to tutor each other. It's literally, the value of that is immeasurable.
Well, it's the connection.
It's the connection.
Really connects. It's like what helps heal communities. It's what helps heal trauma in a lot of ways. And like, you know, in the treatment, mental health treatment, substance use treatment, connection and being part of something super important, because we're really start dealing with trauma. We start getting more confidence. We start feeling more connected. I also think that education, one of the things that it did for me is that I became very, I like instant gratification. You know what I'm saying? So I like passing the test.
Mm-hmm.
I like getting a good grade at the end of the month. You know what I'm saying, or whatever. You know what I mean? I like the progress that I was making, and I could actually start to validate that I am an intelligent person.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that's what education did for me, is that like it started to reinforce the positive things about myself,
as opposed to the negative things that you've been used to reinforcing.
Tell myself, but like, you know what I mean? You go back to I wasn't fortunate enough to get an education while I was incarcerated. But when I got out, it was shortly after I got out too. And but when I got out, it was like I didn't believe that I could actually make it to a degree.
Yeah.
I actually believed that I was going to get the student loan check and never give it back. You know what I mean? But what I did, when I started to believe I can make it to the first day, and then I can make it through the first week, and then I can make it through the first month, and then I just made it. And so you slowly start to gain that belief system, and then it's funny because as the belief system starts to change like that, like I can make it through the first week, everything else starts to change too. You become like literally you get tunnel vision because I'm starting to get rewarded,
and the negative shit starts to kind of break out of the tunnel.
No more.
It just gets to your peripheral, and then it's behind you. And
it's not who you are. You start literally like education helps you, like it's almost like a cocoon, right?
Yeah.
Like it's you start to shed that as you start like passing things, you start learning things, you start sharing your knowledge with your peers, and then before you know it, you're living a completely different life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And what's beautiful, because that's just such a good way to describe it, man. The way that you just described it is so accurate, especially when you are in prison or coming out of prison, and how you attach the education, and it gives you the tunnel vision. But then like hearing about the work that Petey Greene Program and some other people in Philadelphia are doing, that was also really inspiring to me, is pairing education with workforce development. Right, so like, when you educate somebody, it should be right.
I mean, and that's why I think the Petey Greene Project is amazing. Because it's the common sense stuff, and that's how you know they care about people. For sure, right? Because if you don't care about people, you do things one way and that's it. Yeah. So one of the things, I think I apologize, I can't remember his name. But the actual founder of the Petey Greene Program was in the audience, right? And he shared how he started that. Yeah. He was an old tennis player, and he didn't know what he was going to do next with his life, and it started with the idea, I'm going to help somebody. Yeah. It didn't start with like, I'm going to make a bunch of money and get some government contract or anything like that. Is
how I want to help one person.
I'm going to help one person. And that's really why I think that's what makes the Petey Greene Project so special. That's why I was like, duh, because it's like, it makes sense, right? That like if you would have vocation and educational services wrapped into one.
Yeah. And then also have the connections in the community with people to hire people as they come out. Because one thing that's discounted a lot, and that I heard them talking about, and we got to connect with people after, is like, okay, so we institute higher ed programs in prison, and so we get people educated, and then we teach them some other skills, and we teach them that they are employable. But then when they have a hard time getting employed, when they're released, despite all the skills and the knowledge that they have, we still stigmatize them to the point that, people don't want to hire them.
They do all that, and you can't.
It unravels everything, and it actually, it almost is like a double damage, because it makes you not just hate the system, but also hate the fact that, like, man, I did all this work. I had the tunnel vision. I was there. I was in it. And now people won't give me a chance. And the wild part that I can say from my personal experience as somebody coming out into the workforce, after getting educated in prison, but also in my experience meeting people around this country who are doing this work and knowing thousands of people re-entering society after incarceration, if you give somebody that shot if they've gotten their education and they're at that moment in their life where they're like, I just want to work a job, I want to pay taxes, I want to be normal.
Yeah.
You give them the shot and you support them in the job, man, you're going to have the best employee you've ever had.
Best employees ever.
You're going to have the best employee you've ever had because that person is going to get tunnel vision at your workplace the same way.
You also get a loyal person.
Yeah.
Loyal, committed person, because that becomes the value of a lot of people that are coming out of the system.
Yeah.
And I think the Petey Greene Project has done just a very nice job of creating the community to come back to, like you said, the work, the education, everything's wrapped up.
Yeah, lifting people up.
There's and I'm hoping, and that's why it should be a national model. Like you should be aiming to do the same type of work that Petey Greene Project does all across the country. I mean, everywhere.
Yeah, and it's interesting. There's so many different people doing this type of work, and what the Petey Greene Program, and shout out to Jeff Abramowitz, who's the executive director there, for really taking that that program and just bringing it to the next level. And so there's a lot of work similar going on, but there's so many lessons that we can learn from how they've expanded. Like shout out to the Opportunity Scholars in Maine who are doing some higher ed and prison work. Shout out to the underground scholars in California that we've connected with that are doing some amazing work in the education space. And like once we start linking everybody together to realize like we're all doing the same thing, and like we've got the Petey Greene Program, that's one layer of it, and there's all these other layers, and we normalize this on a national conversation about the value of it, and we don't just kind of stick it to each community. And that's what Petey Greene has been so successful at, right? They're in Boston, they're in Philly, they're all over the country in these major hubs. And for us to be able to connect with them and hear about the work they're doing, but also be invited to continue to collaborate, is also at the next layer a testament that's really affirming for, I think, us, because what we've decided to do throughout this last year and some changes to also use this prison door as a public education campaign, almost educating people through the power of this symbol about these type of conversations, right? And if not for the door, and if not for your if not for your actual desire and resilience to continue to say, let me get my door, let me get my door, let me get my door, we might not be in the space to be able to have these conversations. And the wild part, man, is to really think about, like, as I recap the trip to Philly and everything that we learned and all the people we got to connect with and the conversations that we got to have with literally congressmen, with people that are doing the most amazing work in our society and really fighting for rights for people that deserve second chances. I think back about when we met Jeff, right? And this is like the most special part about it to me. We met the executive director at Petey Greene at the National Conference on Higher Ed and Prison, and he walked up on us and was like, what is this? And when we told him the story about the prison door, and when you were able to tell him the story about how you obtained it, and then we kind of told him about our dream and what we want to do with it, in that moment, he became like a friend for life, because...
It feels that way. It feels that way.
Yeah, it really does. And so to like that connection, I'm interested in how you feel, like for me, it was really affirming that like we're doing this. People really are impacted by the door, by your story of obtaining the door, but then by our collective story of like how we believe this like 180-pound prison door can impact and move the needle of reforming our system. I felt like after this trip to Philadelphia, I've driving home, I was like, I felt like LeBron James. I was like, anything is possible. That's how I felt. And I'm interested to see how it feels for you, as being, you literally load this thing up in your truck and you drive it down and it's your prison door and you got the number 18 tattooed on you way before you ever even envisioned a possibility of getting the door. And so how does it feel for you to be in that space talking about these things and connecting with these people, all because of the fact that you were able to obtain your prison cell door?
I was, to be on, being asked to be on the panel is like humbling. It's like humbling to be, in the same conversation with Larry Miller and doing all that stuff. Like but what transcends all that for me in a lot of ways is the fact that no matter what our title is here, no matter what we do here, no matter what your job is, your education level, if you've experienced incarceration, you know what it feels like, the solitude of being behind that door and the loneliness and the despair and the depression and the anxiety and the worry and everything that goes on. Like, you strip away all that. You strip away the title, you strip away anything else that goes along with that, and we are literally just human beings that had to deal with being locked in a cage. And that is like, I think what is able to be carried across the country is that, like, we can overcome those feelings, and like we can move forward, and we can come out of that lifestyle and stuff like that. But I'm not sure if that answers that particular question. But like, for me, it is like, you know, we got the idea, and now here we are. And like, you fast forward just a short couple of years, you know. The most powerful thing about it for me, though, is that, like, you know, I love talking to people on the streets. Like, it was awesome. Like, I was humbled and honored and all that stuff to be on the panel.
Yeah.
Right? But where it is for me is that, like, you know, like I said, I was out there creating this art, and I met the security guard that was like, you know, there was a Birdman out there on the streets. I was over there by the Liberty Bell. And I actually got some really cool art over there. But the security guard comes up. You know, I spent 8 years down. What are you doing over there? You know what I'm saying? And we cracked that conversation with him, and it was a very you know, he couldn't stop talking. He kept looking at it like, man, he couldn't stop talking about it. And he's like, you know what I mean? Like, you could see the connection that we had made, because he instantly, you know what I mean? He just gives me a hug. It was funny, too, because he called the security guard. What are you doing? I thought I was in trouble with the door or something. Like, I was like, oh, I'm sorry. So he was like, no, I actually spent all this time. I said, oh, you're a cop? How? Yeah, you know what I mean? He was like, you got to laugh about that. You know what I mean? Because right then, there was a connection. You know what I'm saying? There was this thing. I knew that he knew how I felt behind that door. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then probably, you know, 5 minutes later, this woman's walking by, and she's like, what are you doing out here with this prison door? Because, like, I'm literally fighting for people on death row right now.
Yeah.
Like, that's what I do. Like, I do. And so the conversation is there, right? And then we pull this thing out. Like I said, we were out at Kensington, and I met a couple, a husband and a wife that, you know, the husband had just got done doing, he'd been out of prison for a couple of years. He found recovery in prison. He's been able to not use in that environment. And then, you know, she sort of struggled a little bit, but like, they were, you know, you could, and you know, I was out there talking to them 5 minutes, but you know, you could feel the connection, the resiliency in them. Like they had a little bit of hope. They were struggling, but they had hope, and they were moving in the right direction. And, you know, if I didn't have that door with them,
and that
I would never have had that conversations with those people. It was just literally that connection there. And I think that is like always the most powerful thing, because I do think that, like I said, being on the panel is like humbling and stuff, but like, the real thing is, like, you know, the people that connect to it and we're able to actually just have a conversation with is the most powerful thing always for me personally.
And I think it's important just to, like, remember too, because when I hear you talking about those experiences, I'm flashing back at all the times we've had similar experiences. I'm flashing back to the police officer we connected with in Brooklyn, New York, who told us about his family's history of incarceration and substance abuse, and that he became a cop to change the system and, like, actually be a solution to the problem, right? And I'm thinking about the Capitol police officer in D.C. who came in and explained to us the meaning of the number 18 in Hebrew and how everything is connected, and you know, and like told us, I'm definitely not allowed to let you be here, but I'm gonna let it rock because I think this is amazing. You know, I'm thinking about the two guys we interviewed on the steps of the Supreme Court who told us their tragic stories about their families getting deported, for being innocent and still getting deported. And I'm thinking about all this connections and the conversations that are prompts. And, it's interesting because when we talk to people about, like, when people say, why, man, why are you doing this? Why did you want your door? Why do you have it? And, like, the why for us now, I think, especially hearing you talk, is because we understand that without it, those exchanges never take place. Those stories never come out. Those connections are never made. And then I just also think about, I flash back so vividly to Jeff and his reaction to the door. And so, when he reacted to the door, he just happens to be in a position and have a platform to say, like, let's put you in front of other people who can affect hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and whatever the case may be.
And I think like Jeff is a guy that, he's system impact.
Yeah.
Right? He understands what happened behind, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
He understands that feeling that I was talking about a minute ago. And I think that's what, we buy into, right? It's like this can unify people.
100%. And, we were down in Philly. We were talking about the value of education for people incarcerated in reentry. We're talking about workforce development and making sure that we actually give people the opportunity to have a livable wage, doing work that's meaningful. And we know you're out there connecting with people through the door, and it just, like, reminds us that this is really something special, and that we, for us, I think this is why we started it from the beginning, just to impact one person, right? Like, I think about what you were saying with the guy who started the Petey Greene Program. He said, I just want to help one person. And I flash back to our conversations about, like, man, maybe we can just help one person with this podcast or with this, artwork. And it feels like the more we keep going, the more it's like, it feels validating that, like, when you make those connections, that 5-minute conversation you had with the security guard and the couple might have impacted them for the rest of their lives. And, like, a year from now, they might be in a moment where they remember you pulling this prison door down the streets in Kensington, and they're reminded of, like, what's at stake and how precious life is and all these things. So, like, for us, I just want to say to everybody who's listening, everybody who's supporting, like, we're going to keep going. We're going to keep pushing. We're going to, be in a community near you, no matter where you are, and continue to network with people and have this on every Kensington and every state at some point or another. And, hope to keep inspiring people to have conversations that wouldn't be had if not for you having your prison door. It's really an honor and a privilege to be able to do this work and talk about these things that matter so much.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And I think another part of it, I know Stevie came with us. Stevie's been impacted by this thing. He spent 25 years incarcerated, and, he just got out from doing 7 years a few months ago. And, like, to see him having the experience with us and, like, getting out and traveling, seeing the world a little bit was, like, that actually was very, very powerful for me, too, because he and I go back. I was a teenager. We were teenagers when we started this thing. We were in prison together when 9/11 happened. We watched that happen from the Rec Room TV. You know what I mean? It was like, to see us go from now he's out here, and he's there was a sense of happiness and freedom that, like, this door provided. Is pretty interesting that, like, it closed us in, and now it's able to provide, like, this sense of joy and freedom inside. Like, we went over to the Rocky statue and stuff. We were, like, clowning around over there, and, like, it was just it was fun, man. It was just, like, a pretty innocent, like, very, very happy moment. I'll never forget that trip. To be honest, it always is very, very powerful, and when we get out and we do this stuff, and the conversations and the people and the art work that we get to create and continue to collect, and we got our DC collection, you know what I'm saying? We got our NYC collection, Boston, Freedom Trail, Fenway Park, Philadelphia, Atlanta, Virginia, you know what I'm saying? We've done some things, man, and it's like, I cannot wait to see how much farther this prison door is going to be able to take us, and how much more hope we're going to be able to provide people.
And shout out again, shout out to Jeff Abramowitz and the Petey Greene Program. Shout out to Larry Miller and Brand Jordan. Shout out to Shuja Moore and the amazing work.
Larry Miller, make sure that MJ gets my T-shirt. Please, I signed it for him.
Yes, we do need MJ to get the T-shirt.
And if you need a larger size, because I know
Got
it's 6'7", hit us up immediately. We'll get it on.
And hopefully one day we'll get Larry on here to talk about his story in the book.
Larry on here.
And shout out to Diverse Force, everybody we connected with out there. But just as importantly, man, shout out to everybody who's listening. Shout out to everybody who's supporting, who's liking the reels, who's downloading the episodes. Without you guys, we don't keep pushing forward. And so share it, like it, link it, everything you can do to support the movement. We're going to be, taking this thing as far as we can, man. But big love to everybody that we've been interacting with. And, thanks again to everybody who's providing us these opportunities to have these conversations.